alerting network. After 2 weeks, there seemed to be some occipital, some visual activity, but still not much connectivity. Maybe he's formed an image relating to the text. However, when he has music at the beginning, we have some sort of faint activity all around the brain, and it's increased. This connectivity is widespread after 2 weeks. And what really brings some hope to me in terms of this research at this early stage is when we look at his behavioural changes. And what we see here is an increase at the beginning and after text. It drops after his 3-week washout, but then it starts picking up again with music and reaches its peak after music therapy treatment. To finish, I want to talk about a future project. I'm hoping to collaborate with the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra just over the road, rehearsing. Susanna here with the CSR and patients at the Royal Hospital. It's turning everything on its head. Instead of picking up brain activity to help us understand what's going on in the brain, it's using the patient's brain activity to enable them to feel like they're involved in creating music, composing music even. So they have a brain-computer interface, a head cap that picks up their occipital, their visual processing. They look at 4 different icons on a screen, which relate to 4 different musical fragments. This is relayed through a computer interface to a screen which is showing those fragments, and the musicians are then told which of the fragments they are to play, the ones that were chosen by the patient themselves. So let's play it. Without further ado, it's just 1 minute, and you can see in real time what's going on. This is a proof of concept with healthy individuals with the head caps. My hope is that I can work with patients who are severely disabled, maybe locked in, so they can't move any of their limbs, but they have full cognition, they have visual potential, or maybe severely disabled patients, and they can get involved in music in a very unique, quite special way. So let's play away.
Interested in developing this technology for people with severe disabilities to allow them to make music. But we also are using this technology for playing music in different ways. In this case here, we are interested in providing active control of the music that's being produced. The user has choices to make, and he or she uses the activity of the brain to make these choices. We are perhaps for research because music is composed of many parts, we have many instruments playing together, and why not having...
So I think that could be a fascinating project, and very much grateful for Susanna for bringing me together with the Royal Philharmonic and really helping this thing to happen. We'll see. And I just wanted to say before finishing that music therapy is not just something in England, America, wherever. It's happening here in Dubai. I have colleagues, Nadia Larson, who works for an outfit that provides all sorts of therapies, including music therapy, here in Dubai. It's the Sensation Station. Marion Ritchie, a colleague of hers, and we have a representative for the area for the World Music Therapy Federation, Oksana Kabalovia. And we're putting together a conference in the Royal Hospital. If any of you are in London in June, you might want to come along. Professor Fackner will be a keynote, and there'll be lots of different people working in music and neuroscience to help different populations. We need to look at other people working in this field and how we can maybe sort of work out what our role is. Should we act as consultants? Should we collaborate on this and that? We need to look at the dose of what we provide. Maybe it's only regular music therapy that supports this neuroplasticity. A lot of research is saying if you do something once a week, it's not going to have much effect on the brain. It might be nice in the moment, but I have a feeling we're going to have to work on the intensity. And just to say that neuroscience is never going to capture our whole experience of music. It's not a panacea. It's not going to tell us everything. So it's important to mention that, because we've all been moved to tears by music, had a spiritual experience even with music, and I don't think an fMRI or an EEG is going to capture everything. It's important to remember that there are those special things about music as well. So we have music and neuroscience is offering subjective biomarkers of the effects of music, looking at the enhanced connectivity and structural change that we can see relating to improvements in mood, language, and so on. But we need to do more research. We need to get involved with organisations such as the CSR, talking to people who might be interested in supporting this sort of work, standardising our protocols and doing some important research that are going to underpin this. Because without that, it's always going to bounce along on the fringes of medicine, and it needs that sort of injection to really get it moving. That's my presentation. I've hopefully interested you. I maybe would take questions after Professor Fackner, unless you have just maybe one question at this point. No? Okay, let's go straight along with Professor Jörg Fackner, who needs to get his laptop up and running.
And not only that, I need to go for a short moment outside and come back.
Okay, short moment. I'll take a question while you're doing that. Okay.
All right.
Do you want to get his laptop fired up? Yeah. Yes.
While with the music that they liked, all states seem to get an increase. Was it up in the
It dropped off. I wonder if, oh, I can't get the slide up now. I think I know the, yeah.
That was quite interesting. None of them were affected except for the DS. It seems to have been something there.
Do you see, I think we use the word vegetative states, and it conjures to mind that vegetable is the worst word, but it's something that's not responding to anything. But in actuality, the vegetative state is a broad continuum of patients who have selective responses to a number of stimuli. It just doesn't connect all the way to show that they can process a command and say, can you close your hand, and so on. That doesn't mean that they might have a withdrawal response to something they sounds hostile to them. Or they might have a startle response to the white noise, and that was the thing that was more confounding than the dislike. Yeah. Maybe in that they're trying to join the dots and they're hearing water. It's the sound we hear when we're in the womb, so maybe it's taking it back. I'm just hypothesizing. I can't ask the patient.
Sure.
But I think it's more important to see if they're having a response that actually is similar to a healthy response to something complex like music. That's your routine.
And one more thing, sorry.
No, you're fine. We're just waiting for you to...
In terms of the stress part, I'm sure there's a lot of stress, or there's a lot of research that looked at stress in all these different states, healthy, VS, and has somebody tried to see, once you play the music, whether you like, dislike with the background, and how that increase or decrease in different brain waves correlates to alleviation or an increase in stress levels? Because that's not very difficult to... I know you're looking at, as you say, autonomic sim via parasim, but somebody maybe got even as much as taking a saliva sample out of 100 microliters, a small amount, and gone ahead and...
Fortunately for me, I managed to get a full-time job, and that was in palliative care, how to do that. And then I moved into this field about 7-8 years ago.
Because I've attended also the talks and...
Let's go for it. Shall I let you introduce yourself?
Yes. You see, maybe it's time to stand up for a short moment and stretch, and we have this, well, not a long afternoon. Yes, well, my name is Jörg Fackner. I'm working in the UK after I have been working in music therapy for about, 15 years in Germany, and then moved to Finland, where you mentioned Csr Rpo also is working, and so we were there into music therapy research. So thank you very much also for your words, Julian, and that we share this interest in the music therapy and how the brain responds to music. And of course, on the overall topic of music and neuroscience, and which is informing us about what is happening in music, while at the same time, as music therapists or person who have seen music therapists working, know that the use of music in the field of music neuroscience research is not straight what we would do in music therapy. So the tools that are used are the same, it is music, but the way how it is used to find out about how the brain works and how we kind of spark healing processes is a bit of a different thing sometimes. So I'm going to go into that. Anyway, international perspectives on the art and science of music therapy. I felt, especially now being here in Dubai, to say that this idea of using music in therapeutical settings or in the field of healing, first of all, it's quite old, because I mean there are many ways that music is used in, let's say, in the shamanism, but of course there are different ideas of that. But to use it in a hospital, that is definitely an idea that has developed. For instance, here in Turkey, it is an Oriental development that we're looking at. This is a rebuild or a remodel of a situation in a hospital in Edirne in Turkey, and it shows the musicians playing for the ill and playing certain music that would restore and regulate their disbalance and dysregulated health. And so that is, as I said, in Edirne. And then we have many pictures as well on, for instance, hospitals where this idea that there is a harmonious and a cosmological order is reflected in the surrounding of where the ill are, and to, for instance, use the sound of water as a curing element, and use the harmonic properties of a building, which is beautiful. So, and overall, to use the assets of the beauty to restore health and to show how the relationship to, let's say, even on the spiritual level, is to be regained again. So, and what we see here, for instance, that's from 1920. We can see that they were using a phonograph there. And then we see some whirling dervishes there. So there is a lot of this tradition that tells us about that this use of music in a hospital setting is not something that is very new, but that there is also a lot of tradition here. And I know that there are problems because music seems to be related to this idea of getting evoked, getting aroused, getting too much into maybe a mood which is not so easy to control. But at the same time, there is a tradition of adoring the beauty. And that is, so I think this is very, very interesting. And well, but this is how we are as human beings. We change in our ideas on how things are. Look at that, that's from 1820. It is a book about using the makam, certain songs, to address parts of the body to get into order again. Well, the overarching topic and theme about it is, of course, that music is used for regulation. And now I'm quoting from a colleague who's in medical anthropology and also looked at the traditional Oriental music therapy approaches and said, well, it is presenting a cosmic order. It is presenting the beauty and how things should be. And when you are ill, you are getting out of these principles. But it is, of course, a paradigm which related to those people believing that and being really involved in it. But as we are in a situation where things also change to some degree, it doesn't need to change that much in the way how we relate to our spiritual sources, but the way how we relate each other as human beings is, as I say, it is on the way how we relate to each other. So, and this communication, interaction, all these terms are the terms also, of course, when we speak about music therapy and how music is used in this field. So it is more that we try to interpret and how music is active in this relationship. Well, and this idea of relationship to the music or to instruments, to the beauty and to others is, for instance, reflected a little bit in this example here from an Alzheimer client who was playing with the sound of the ocean drum. And when she stopped playing, the therapist asked her, does this instrument remind you of anything? Well, it reminds me on the sea and the place that I lived. So where was it? I asked. I don't remember. So of course, Alzheimer, there's a problem. But then she remembered, well, in Southend, in a house next to the sea. And then she was singing a goodbye song, and then this lady became quite tearful. And so the therapist is asking, so what is happening? It's making you emotional, all these lovely memories. Is it okay to cry? But isn't it nice that you can recall them, which is another thing that is important with music, that we can assess very strong memories. But at the same time, and here the relationship to the beauty, to this kind of wholeness that she had when she was with the family and with the children. And she was remembering just in the sound of this ocean drum that, that these situations were very important in her life. And I couldn't resist, especially when we had our discussions also on coma, and to bring in this video, because it shows one of these first music therapy work with coma clients, in which a coma client was on an intensive care unit. And those who have been on intensive care units, they know it is quite noisy. It has a lot of sound, and machines are beeping some regular things. And until this work has been done, and that we're talking about the late 80s, the early 90s, the awareness of the sound surrounding in an intensive care unit has not been clear to those physicians working in this area, that it has an influence. And in this particular client, I mean, there are many other stories, and of course over exaggerated stories. He said when he woke up from the coma that, well, the sound of the computer was ships, and so there is a something in that surrounding that kept him away. But then a voice of a woman came in singing to him, and he perceived this voice as a nun. You know, he was on a battlefield with knights, and he perceived this voice as a nun that is talking to him. So let me see if that is now quite low. So she was just singing, and what Julian said with, you know, and training to the breath, and training to the, to that state in which that particular person was in, and that made him then really opening his eyes. Of course, there is this fluctuation of awareness in the day, but when coming back to this, he said, well, there was this moment in which I knew I'm not in danger anymore. So music representing a situation of secureness, while at the same time it can represent a hostile environment. The acoustic was in presenting that. Anyway, what do you think, how many people have been at the Society for Neuroscience meeting, and the last meeting in 2014? Well, I wasn't there as well, but the statistics tell us it's about 24,000 people coming to a yearly meeting. So we can see that the neurosciences, they are quite popular in a way. So, and what we have seen as well, and what I'm kind of repeating things that Julian has said, is with brain research, we may want to know more about what is going on, and of course neuroplasticity, a big term that tells us about the regrowth of certain parts in the brain. And this a picture of the articular fasciculus from Gottfried Schlauch, showing that we can that the brain is able to adapt to new situations and to cope with illness. That is, of course, showing that music has an influence on the body. It's not just something nice that we're doing. We're not just playing and having the aesthetics. We're having the beauty. We're having the harmonic, and that's it. No, it has an influence on the body. And that is, of course, what is giving hope on one hand. And there is, of course, Julian has shown that work from, Daniel Levitin. So we have maps on how music is processed in certain areas of the brain, and we know, for instance, from this work from Piotr Janata, who's done a mapping on the results of, for instance, how emotion is processed to that particular research paradigm in which a certain piece of music was played. So there is a wide variety of results, and one of the things that is, of course, becoming clear, it is really a stimulus that is very specific and global at the same time. We are looking at a system, or that music perception is processed or is functioning in a way that, you know, is of course always related to that stimulus that you give, and then you have a certain measuring technique that produces some data, and then you can relate the activity of the brain to a certain part in the brain, and then, but the mappings are still, it's not really that we could kind of trust on it, because it is, we know that the individual wiring, or the way how you grew up and your brain is developing, that from the Alzheimer client in the beginning. At the same time, we have the chance to show that there is like a general ability to respond to sound, and that the meaning that is attached to sound is making the difference. Anyway, so I didn't want to go too much in that. We have certain measuring techniques, and when we're talking about the EEG, you have these two things. You have the ongoing activity that you can measure, which means you have an ongoing EEG that records a certain time frame that you may want to just matching or mismatching, or that suddenly there is when looking at output paradigms, for instance, that the same thing comes in a reversed order. And so because the tools that we have, they have the restrictions. You have to know exactly how you can record with them. So one of the problems is movement. One of the factors that, especially in research, is when it comes to music and emotion research, is that, well, that the emotion changes over time, and that we may not see a unifying feature of a particular piece of music because there are parts in it. So this is a discussion. Can we, well, we will listen as an individual, we will listen to ongoing music, but at the same time, we may say, well, this is a sad song, or this is a sad song, it is for me sad music. While when you try to generalize, so this question of this individual, the uniqueness of the music, and on the other hand, you try to generalize, like our discussion with the Mozart effect. And that is sometimes a bit of a tricky thing when you set up research. And so one of that is the length of the music when it comes to music and emotion. And of course movement, because you can get movement artifacts. So but there are tools to work around that. And for instance, in some of the studies, and I want to show later, is that you just train the people to be accustomed to the tools, so that that wearing, for instance, an EEG is not something completely different to the normal life, or being in a scanner. There's this mock scanners where you would lie down in an fMRI. Has anybody have you been in one? No? Yeah, the functional magnetic resonance imaging, right? Because it can be quite a claustrophobic experience when this, magnetic coil is going along. So, and that is, of course, an experiential question that we're looking at. So how much of that is what we see in the results are related to the machine? But of course, statistics tell us it's for everybody. The same situation while being in the scanner, so we just wipe out that noise and we will look at the results of it. Anyway, so we can train subjects, we can work with them to get things done. And for instance, one study, an Italian study from Babyloni, working with 4 professional saxophonists. You see where I want to go to. I want to say, well, we have trouble with looking at short parts of the music when measuring their quality. But the experience of making music together, how can we get closer to that? Because that is what we do in music therapy. Julian has played music to the clients, and others do that as well, and interact. So there's something in this process of interaction that we want to capture to some degree. And, well, the general question, I've asked it already, so why do we want to do research in music therapy, brain research? Does it help us to explain why change happens? And change is, of course, when we want to show our effectiveness of the method, is important to document that. And one way is, of course, that has been quite successful in music therapy, doing randomized controlled trials. And with that, we have been able to show, for instance, in the depression study that we've done in Jyväskylä in Finland, that music therapy adds something to standard care which makes it much more effective to do standard care with depression clients. I'll come back to that later maybe. And change is, when we look at the sessions, on music therapy session, it starts, let's say, in the first session, where you try to get closer to that client and you try to establish a communication. Well, nothing's going to happen, but suddenly you play, for instance, like with this Alzheimer client in the 7th session, playing the sound, this ocean drum, and then there is a reaction coming up. So it is a question of dose we're looking at and a question of the development. And so if we want to find out what is working in music therapy, we need to get closer to understand how the relationship patterns and in the brain, how they are interacting. Well, that is, of course, something that I'm interested in, and others are interested as well. But that may tell us a bit more about what is happening on this timeline of events when suddenly that music is becoming meaningful that hasn't been meaningful. So this example with this Alzheimer client is kind of documenting that there was this response, that the remembrance of being with the family, that this is attached to playing this instrument. So, and that was then becoming clear in the 7th session. So we have to, and so what I'm interested in and working on in the moment is to see how can we capture these moments. And one of the things that we can do, I'm trying to shorten my presentation because there's a lot of things coming up later on that, is using mobile technologies. There are tools like this Nexus, for instance, is one of them, that you have the chance to record single lines of, for instance, heart rate and or the ECG, of course, and EEG, and then you have a longer time period that you can control. So, and they are not like we have seen in the video; they are more applicable to daily life situations, and that is something that is of interest to utilize in music therapy research that tries to capture more of these moments in which interaction that is meaningful is happening. So these are tools to get there. Yes, and well, there are studies. I mean, you have shown some of them and discussed, for instance, this study from Csr Rpo clients, and you can use for instance, the resting state recording to see if there is an influence on the resting state of that particular group for beginning of the therapy, like we've done that in Finland with 27 or 79 depressed clients and that clients that were in the music group. And we were looking just at the resting state EEG to see if there is any change after they have received on average 18 hours of music therapy. So, and you can see that kind of low dose, it made a difference, and in favor of keeping things close, because we say that we were able to show that the areas processing music and language were becoming different in the group that was receiving music therapy, and actually also to language perception. And we know from, for instance, Anurag Patel's studies and from the work from Stefan Kolsch that the brain utilizes shared language. But one of the ideas when we're looking at Kolsch studies, for instance, that we may have to find a certain music which is interaction and playing together. While when you would play that as a single piece in an ERP study, for instance, you could discuss, let's say, a harmonic principle and a disharmonic principle with that. And you could ask how the brain is responding to the, let's say, disharmonic part, and how it's processing disharmonic and how it is processing harmony. But the music therapist would use both of it to create a moment in which something is happening. And as I said, I already spoke about the biomarkers. This is the study that we then published in the British Journal of Psychiatry, quite nice and high-ranking journal. And that was the setup that we were using for in this depression study. And it is important. It was an individual training, so 20 sessions for each it was. But compared to, on average we had 18 sessions. So I don't want to go that much now into the results of that, what I've already told you, that we've seen changes in the frontless alpha symmetry and how that relates to the changes in areas in the Broca area processing and make speech production. But I want to show you that when we are using, for instance, mobile EEGs for with two persons, that we can come closer to these moments and events. And one of the studies that was kind of pioneering in this area used the ECG, and they did a rating as a music therapist would do: what is happening in session 1, what is happening in session 2, what is happening in session 3, and then identifying that in that, let's say in session 4, there is something happening here after about, am I wrong, 8 minutes of the therapy session. And so what they did, they were, wiring up two persons, the client here, of course, in a comic-wise fashion shown, and the pianist, and they just made it happen that these two ECG sources were then recorded together. And here, and the interesting part was that what I'm talking about is, of course, when you're getting into musical dialogue, when you're improvising together. And in these moments, it was so that in the heart rate of the two players, there was a relationship pattern that we could see. So it was different to those moments in which they were not playing together. And you can rate that from the music, so that and what music therapists, of course, say is when you play together and when the music becomes meaningful, and that is what is often presented in case studies in music therapy on development of clients in the music therapy. There are moments chosen, and the aim to understand what is happening in such moments that have dialogical qualities. That is what was behind this research, and I want to play a little bit of it here now. So you can see these two persons improvising together, and then you can see in a very low quality, but that there is the ECG coming in, and then the analysis was done, and you could see a convergence of activity as parallel or opposite heart rates and simultaneous or alternating peaks indicating action-specific synchrony patterns of coordinated activity. Remembering your presentation, well, these are, let's say, parts of the music therapy action mechanism we're looking at, that that there is a convergence, that there is synchronicity happening, and the question is, how much is that happening in the brain? And looking at the research that has been done in Italy on it, well, for instance, playing 4 saxophone players together and linking up 4 EEGs to see how their brain patterns interact. They were interested in shared sources of activity. And another example on that same line is done with 2 guitarists. I will come to the results of the Babylonia study. But what we can see here is 2 guitarists playing a melody together. And the interesting thing is, well, how can you then see that the 2 brains are processing the same content or really are in relationship? So one of the concepts they are looking at is the phase relationship of the 2 EEGs. And the setup of this study was to look at at certain parts of the playing. I'm going to play this now. So you see these 2 guitarists wearing the EEG cap, and they're playing one melody together. And you see here, the recording of one guitarist and then a recording of the other one. And what you see here is a knock on the wood of the guitar, which was an event that was looked up in the EEG later. And you hear the metronome. And what was obvious is that in those moments when they are relating their activity, they're playing together, when they were trying to get on the same metronome, then you could see an increase of phase synchrony in this in the EEG of the 2 players. While with the 4 saxophone players, you could see that, for instance, this one, the alto saxophone leading the play, that it had a different usage of the resource what they were looking with this research is when they were starting to play the same melody together. Now the 4 saxophone players start playing together, and we're looking on how much of these alpha-related synchronization or desynchronization. Julia has shown this, the fast or the slow EEG patterns. And synchronization is always that something is slowing in the EEG. Desynchronization is always when it's getting fast, when the waves are faster. And they serve different functionalities there. So it is so that there is what we have seen in this study from Lindenberger, and that was with the 2 guitarists, and from Babylonia, that 2 brains working at the same time, processing same information. And we can also, there's work in game theory, on game research, neuroeconomy. We can see that there is also shared information processing that can be traced with the fMRI. So one of the current developments, especially what I'm interested on, is to look at, well, how we can utilize this further and go and to see how co-creation of meaning in the brain and in therapy is generated. And, well, this is from the McMaster Institute of Music, Mind and the Brain, setting up a huge performance lab, as we have also seen in this video from Eduardo Miranda, where the 4 persons were looking at the screen and steering, and in what was in your last video that you showed, So this is a topic, a hot topic in neuroscience, social neuroscience especially, how we create meaning and how are the brains interacting in this area. And that is a part that I wanted to show here today, although I'm sorry if I have bored and taken too much of your time now, but no, we are 5, and that's it for today. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Professor Fagner. Well, it's been a pleasure to speak to all of you today. We have time for a couple of questions. I think before some of you, I'm sure, would like to go and see the concert or have a little walk around, maybe a drink before the concert. So does anyone have any questions? Yes?
We've been talking about how music is used as a therapy. Do you think music can detect any illnesses like autism or anything like this?
That's a good question.
Music can detect?
Can music detect
any
illnesses?
Well, I remember that one of my colleagues working with patients who so they didn't like the waltz rhythm, and that was something that was quite interesting. It wasn't then taken forward if that is related to their musical preferences or if that is something that is more general. So there are indications, but that you can go that far that you play certain music, and then you would know that this person, let's say, has this or that disease. We are not there yet, but what seems to be the case is that, for instance, depressive clients, and that was coming out in our study, in the depression study in Finland as well, was that they rate music differently. So let's say if healthy clients would rate a music as, let's say, happy or tenderness representing, a depressed client would say that's sad music. So that is possible. So you can use the recognition of music to some degree have an indication of, let's say, a preponderance to a certain direction of a disease, but we're not there that we can say, well, if that person is listening to that music or listening to that or is responding to these parts of the music, then we're looking at a morbus Crohn client. That is not the case.
I can perhaps jump in with one example. It's quite a rare condition known as Huntington's disease.
Oh, yeah.
You're familiar with that. Well, someone did a study hoping to find that music therapy might help patients with Huntington's disease, and we do work with them at the hospital. We can see anecdotally that it helps. But what he found actually was it was a way of working out when their disease was getting worse, because one of the problems with Huntington's disease comes with processing your rhythm, and that affects your gait and all your movements. And he noticed when they went from the sort of moderate to the advanced stage, they could no longer tap in time to music. So it wasn't quite what he was hoping for, but he could see that music was a tool to help assess how the illness was developing. And then, of course, you can say, well, this patient needs X, Y, and Z because he's advanced. Just a sort of side example. Music. Yeah.
It's amazing what music therapy can or has the potential to do. In the future, we'll come to the future, but can you see it being used as a standalone therapy, as an adjuvant therapy with the current, more, say, traditional used medicines? How do you see it?
What I say from depression, obviously with this randomized controlled trial done and published, it is so that we could claim it is making sense to add it to standard care. And I think that is something that comes out of other studies when comparing to standard care of that particular disease, that it seems to be a good thing to add it to the standard care. And that is even going, especially for instance in dementia study that was published in 2013 from Denmark clients and Scandinavian clients, colleagues, sorry, it was shown that the amount of medication needed was going down, while you can't stop a neurodegenerative disease. Sorry for my English, so sometimes I'm a little bit clumsy, but. Well, I would say yes, I see for the future that we can add music to several treatments, and that it would make it easier. It has been used in dental practice as a, instead of using the, so that is, we have this, and we can watch that in many of the results. We could go now really into the details, but dementia, the depression, dental practice, and maybe
with my work,
much more.
I mean, most of my patients are on very strong stimulants to boost their arousal levels as much as they can. It may be that music just gives it that added boost on top of that level that enables them to be alert enough to assess, well, that patient's actually aware in that moment of that session, or priming them for a full behavioural assessment. But yes, I think we're very much working on top of standard care mostly. But there may be examples in the future where people just get so much about it in itself that it's going to be a case-by-case basis to start with, I think.
I think it'd be great. Now, my mind was going towards detrimental. So if we can try to get more on the music therapy, music is a beautiful thing. Most people will just go along with the music, especially if it's something that they like. And get more reliance on the music and less reliance on the drugs.
Absolutely, yeah. Drugs have the side effects, and I think the subtlety and the nuances of music reach parts, to quote a beer advert, that other things don't reach. A drug may reach a certain level, but there's something that can be tailored to that individual, that can treat them holistically, and that uses human beings. These sort of things are integral to music therapy.
There's always a little bit of this Hawthorne effect when it comes to music, because you're suddenly getting into the core of the persons, because you talk about something that arouses them emotionally. So there is the whole, this is what I was kind of talking about. We can look at the fragments, but of course, it is something where you start to interact with somebody, in music. And the listening process and the studies mentioned from Teppo Sarkamo in Finland, or also with others, is that, of course, if you listen to your preferred music, the rehabilitation times are shorter, and are, that, so there is benefits also to that. But again, it is something that looks to the relation to the music, because it is preferred music. It is not a music that has a certain property that has been found to be, effective for, let's say. So this kind of, let's say, music pharmacon, that we would know that we have to choose this music to treat that client, that is something that needs a longer time frame and a bigger and stronger statistical base to be really sure about understanding the action mechanism of music.
Well, I think, unless there are any other questions, we'll call our little mini symposium to an end. And thank you again for coming. And maybe see some of you at the concert later. And of course, thank you to Dr. Castaldo over there for organising this event and helping it happen. Do you want to say anything?
Please, yeah.
No, what can I say?
Hopefully we've said it for you. Well, I never thought I'd see that.
Right.
Thank you. The drug regime they're on, or various other confounders. But with other populations, cortisol's been used with cancer patients at the Bristol Cancer Centre, and it's shown that music has helped their stress levels and their immunity levels. So there's been some great research there.
Beautiful work. Really nice.
Thank you. I'm very, very honoured to be doing it, and long may it continue. We'll see. The early findings for that one patient give me hope that,
Oh, maybe it's fine.
that we may find something when we pull the data, we can really say something about it. It's not easy getting 20 patients in a hospital where they're slowly being discharged, and medical instabilities and so on. Did you have a question? No.
So where did you study music therapy?
Bristol, have you enough? Yeah, with Leslie Bunt, who did that study, I just mentioned something.